Claire Thompson was not an ordinary teenager. Even as a child, she noticed things others didn't. She loved to read, watch people, and quietly piece together the stories behind their actions. Growing up, Claire saw how relationships worked and didn't work. She saw her mother's friends cry over broken marriages, her Aunt Rachel worry about her husband's behavior, and how many women seemed to struggle in silence. It was during one of these moments that Claire's life changed forever. She was only 14 when she overheard her Aunt Rachel talking to her mom. Rachel's voice was low, filled with sadness. "I don't know what's wrong with Adams," she said. "He's distant. He's not the man I married." Claire's heart sank. Aunt Rachel had always been kind to her, treating her like a daughter. She couldn't stand to see her unhappy. That's when Claire decided to help. She didn't know exactly how yet, but she knew one thing. Uncle Adams was hiding something, and she was going to find out what. Claire began paying closer attention to Uncle Adams. He wasn't like the warm, loving man she remembered from family gatherings. Now he always seemed distracted, his phone glued to his hand, and he avoided spending time with Aunt Rachel. Claire didn't say anything, but she made a plan. If Adams was hiding something, she would find out. The next week, when Adams left for work, Claire quietly followed. She kept her distance, her heart racing as she trailed him to a cafe. Adams wasn't alone. Sitting across from him was a woman Claire had never seen before. They were laughing and leaning in close, as if sharing secrets. Claire's stomach turned. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. But Claire wasn't just going to tell Aunt Rachel what she saw. She needed proof. She borrowed an old camera her mom used for family photos and returned to the cafe the next day. This time, she snapped pictures of Adams holding the woman's hand and smiling at her like he hadn't smiled at Aunt Rachel in months. It was all the proof she needed. Now came the hardest part, deciding what to do with the evidence. Claire didn't want to hurt Aunt Rachel, but she also couldn't let Adams get away with it. After thinking it through, she came up with a bold plan. She wrote a letter, careful not to sign her name. "Adams, I know what you've been doing. If you don't stop and start treating Rachel like the wife she deserves to be, I will send these pictures to your pastor and your boss. Show Rachel you care. Take her shopping, plan a trip, whatever it takes. Make things right." She slipped the letter and the photos into an envelope and left it on the front seat of Adams's car. A few days later, Claire saw the results of her work. Uncle Adams came home early, holding a bouquet of Aunt Rachel's favorite flowers. "Pack your bags," he said with a smile. "We're going on a trip." Aunt Rachel was shocked and overjoyed. For the first time in months, she looked genuinely happy. She thought it was a miracle. Claire knew better. Watching Aunt Rachel smile and laugh again filled Claire with pride. She had fixed something that felt broken, and no one had to know it was her. For Claire, this wasn't just about fixing her aunt's marriage. It was about justice, making sure people who hurt others faced the consequences. Watching Uncle Adams treat Aunt Rachel with kindness and respect again made Claire realize she had the power to make a difference. But she didn't stop there. Not long after, Aunt Rachel's best friend, Mrs. Gloria, came over for tea. Claire overheard them talking in the living room. Gloria looked tired, her voice filled with frustration. "Rachel, I think my husband is cheating on me," Gloria said quietly. "He's been so distant lately. I don't even know how to approach him about it. It's like he's slipping away from me." Rachel leaned forward, concern etched on her face. Gloria sighed and continued, "I remember you saying a while back that Adams was acting differently too. What did you do? How did you fix your marriage?" Rachel gave a small, puzzled smile. "Honestly, Gloria, I didn't do anything. One day he just changed. It was like he woke up and decided to be the man I married again. I don't know what caused it, but it's been amazing. We've been like lovebirds ever since." Gloria's tired expression softened with a flicker of hope. "Do you think the same thing could happen for me? Maybe, whatever worked for you will work for me, too." Rachel reached out and squeezed Gloria's hand. "I hope so. Truly, I do. Whatever it was, I'm grateful for it every day." The conversation ended there, but Claire, listening silently from the next room, her mind already working, she felt a familiar determination rise within her. She had made a difference for Aunt Rachel, and she remembered how it felt to help Aunt Rachel and decided she couldn't ignore Gloria's pain. It was time to step in again. And now it was time to help Mrs. Gloria. Over the next few days, Claire quietly observed Gloria's husband. He followed a similar pattern to Uncle Adam's, distracted, secretive, and always glued to his phone. Claire made note of his habits, the places he visited, the people he met, and the times he came and went. It didn't take long for her to gather what she needed. With the evidence in hand, Claire composed a new anonymous letter. I know what you're doing. If you don't stop and start treating Gloria with the love and respect she deserves, I will expose your actions to your pastor and your employer. Make things right. Take her out, show her she's valued, and stop this nonsense. She placed the letter in an envelope, along with a photo she had taken of Gloria's husband with another woman. Late one evening, she slipped it into the mailbox outside their home. Within days, the results began to show. Gloria's husband canceled his late nights and came home earlier than usual. He surprised Gloria with her favorite flowers, planned a romantic dinner, and even arranged for them to spend a weekend at a luxury resort. Gloria was overjoyed. Rachel, it's like magic, she exclaimed during their next tea session. He's planning date nights again, he's attentive, he even booked a vacation for just the two of us. I don't know what happened, but it's like he's a completely different man. Rachel smiled knowingly but remained quiet. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than mere coincidence. For Claire, seeing the joy on Aunt Rachel's face and later on Gloria's filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced before. She realized that her actions had the power to change lives. At first, it was just about helping people she cared about, but the success of these two cases made her think bigger. She began to wonder how many other women were silently suffering, just like Aunt Rachel and Gloria had been. One evening, Claire sat in her room, reflecting on everything she had done. The thought of expanding her efforts began to take shape. She didn't need recognition or payment. The joy of seeing families healed and women genuinely happy was all the reward she needed. That night, she made a decision. She would find a way to help more women, even if it meant staying in the shadows. But how could she find these women? Claire thought about her mother's social and church groups. These gatherings often brought together women from all walks of life, and Claire knew that some of them were likely dealing with troubled marriages. She decided to start there, listening carefully to the conversations around her. First, Claire simply observed. She noticed the subtle signs, women who avoided talking about their husbands, those who looked tired or withdrawn, and the ones who shared small, hesitant complaints about their home lives. Slowly, she began to gather clues. When she was sure of a situation, she would take action. Her method was simple. Investigate discreetly, gather evidence, and use her anonymous letters to address the men involved. Claire wasn't doing this for money or fame. Her motivation was purely the joy of helping others. Seeing women smile again, hearing laughter return to homes that had been filled with silence. These were the moments that drove her. With her strategy in place, Claire began taking on more cases. She started with women in her mother's circle, carefully selecting situations she could handle. Each success brought a new sense of fulfillment and reinforced her belief in what she was doing. Soon, whispers began to spread. Women started talking about the sudden changes in their husbands' behavior, sharing their stories at social gatherings. They didn't know who was behind the transformations, but they felt grateful. Some even started calling the mysterious helper a secret marriage fixer. Slowly, she started taking on more cases. But as the stories spread, something unexpected happened. More women wanted her help. Claire realized she needed a way for people to reach her directly, without knowing who she was. That's when she had an idea, a secret blog. Claire created the blog late one night, using an anonymous name. She made it simple. Women could send her messages, sharing their stories and asking for help. Only she would see the messages, and she would decide which cases to take. The blog gave her a way to help women she didn't even know. Soon, messages started coming in. Women poured out their hearts, describing how their husbands had changed or how they felt something was wrong. Claire read every message carefully, picking cases where she felt she could make the most difference. Each time, she used the same method: investigate, gather evidence, and send an anonymous letter to the man involved. Claire wasn't just helping women close to her anymore. She was reaching people she'd never met, and the joy of seeing their lives change kept her going. She knew she couldn't stop now. Claire wasn't just helping people anymore. She was learning how to be smarter with her approach. She realized that not every man was scared of the same things. Some feared their pastors or losing respect in their church. Others worried about their jobs or what their employers might think. But Claire also knew there were men who didn't care about any of that. They didn't fear anyone. For those men, Claire used something they couldn't ignore: their money and property. She reminded them that if their wives filed for divorce, especially after a court marriage, they could lose half of everything they had worked for. In her anonymous letters, she would make it clear: if they didn't stop cheating and start treating their wives right, she would help the wives get everything they deserved. Because Claire was anonymous, the men had no idea who she was or how she got her information. This made her threats even scarier. They believed she could follow through, and the fear kept them in line. No one wanted to risk losing their homes, businesses, or savings. Claire tailored her letters to fit each man's weakness. Depending on what the husbands fear most, Claire tailors her threats. For some, it's exposure to pastors or employers. For others, it's a financial threat, reminding them that a court-married wife could claim half of their property if they divorce. And she would give their wives evidence they needed in court. She always used the right leverage to ensure the men fell in line, carefully targeting what mattered most to them. She used whatever leverage would hit hardest, ensuring compliance without ever revealing her identity. Whether it was their reputation, finances, or relationships, she knew how to strike where it would hurt the most. Every time she watched a family come back together, it reinforced how meaningful her work truly was. One day, Claire received a message on her blog. A woman named Sarah had written to her, pouring out her heart. Sarah's husband, Daniel, had been acting distant for months. He barely spent time at home, always making excuses about work. Sarah had found receipts for fancy dinners and gifts, things she knew weren't meant for her. She felt lost and didn't know what to do. Claire read the message carefully, noting every detail Sarah shared. It was clear that Daniel was hiding something, and Claire decided to take the case. She began by quietly observing Daniel. Using the tools she had learned over time, she tracked his movements and gathered evidence. Claire discovered that Daniel was meeting another woman at a small, upscale restaurant every Thursday evening. He would spend hours there, laughing and enjoying himself, completely unaware that Claire was watching from a distance. Once Claire had enough evidence, photos, receipts, and detailed notes, she crafted her letter. This time, she knew Daniel wouldn't care about what his pastor or boss thought. He was a businessman, and his greatest fear was losing his wealth. Claire wrote, "I know what you're doing. If you don't end this affair immediately and start treating Sarah with the respect she deserves, I will make sure she has the evidence to take you to court. You'll lose half of everything, and she will have every right to walk away with what she's owed. You have one chance to make this right." She slipped the letter and photos into an envelope and left it on the front seat of Daniel's car. Within days, Claire saw the results. Daniel canceled all his dinner plans with the other woman and started coming home early. He brought Sarah flowers and apologized for being distant. The following weekend, he surprised her with a romantic getaway, something they hadn't done in years. Sarah sent a follow-up message to the blog. "Whoever you are, thank you. I don't know what you did, but Daniel is back. He's the man I married again. I can't thank you enough." Claire smiled as she read the message. Another family saved. Her process was becoming smoother with each case, and she felt more confident in her ability to help. At first, Claire thought her work was going unnoticed. The men she helped set straight never talked about it, and their wives were simply grateful for the changes. But soon, something unexpected began to happen. The mistresses started noticing a pattern. One by one, their lovers were cutting ties without warning. At first, it seemed random, but as more and more men returned to their wives, the mistresses began to talk among themselves. "Something isn't right," one of them said. "He was so into me last week, And now he's acting like I don't exist. Same here, another replied. He told me he's fixing things with his wife. But why now? It's like someone is interfering. The women couldn't ignore the pattern. Every time they thought they had control, their lovers suddenly changed, apologizing to their wives and cutting all communication. It was too consistent to be a coincidence. The mistresses started asking questions. They compared stories, trying to figure out what was happening. Who was behind this? How were these men being pushed back to their marriages? As their suspicions grew, so did their determination to uncover the truth. Some of them even began following their lovers, hoping to catch a clue. But Claire had been careful. She worked in the shadows, leaving no trace of her involvement. Still, the tension was rising. The more cases Claire took on, the closer the mistresses got to discovering that someone was out there, undoing their work. Claire's anonymity, which had been her greatest strength, was now at risk. As the whispers about the secret marriage fixer grew louder, Claire began to feel the pressure. More and more women were reaching out to her, desperate for help, but the attention made her uneasy. The mistresses were starting to ask questions, and Claire knew it was only a matter of time before someone tried to dig deeper into her methods. Claire realized she had to be smarter. She couldn't afford to leave any clues behind. She began changing how she operated, making her methods even more discreet. Instead of delivering letters herself, she started using anonymous online services to send her warnings. She made sure every piece of evidence she collected was destroyed as soon as she used it. She also became more selective with her cases. Claire only took on the ones where she knew she could make a real difference. This helped her stay focused and reduced the risk of making mistakes. But the pressure didn't stop. The mistresses were growing more determined, and the whispers of her work were spreading faster than ever. Some women had started calling her a guardian angel, while others thought of her as a mystery no one could solve. Claire couldn't let these whispers turn into something bigger. Despite the risks, Claire refused to stop. She reminded herself of the joy she brought to the women she helped and the families she saved. But as she continued her work, she knew she was walking a fine line. One wrong move and everything she had built could come crashing down. Claire had come a long way since she first helped Aunt Rachel. Now in her mid-20s, she had built a life that balanced her anonymous work as a PI and her personal achievements. After finishing high school, Claire went on to study cybersecurity at a top university. She chose the course because it matched her love for solving problems and digging deep for answers. Cybersecurity also gave her the tools she needed to stay ahead of anyone who might try to track her down. While in university, Claire worked hard, learning everything she could about online investigations, data protection, and even hacking. She became highly skilled with technology, using her knowledge to keep her identity a secret and improve her work. To further sharpen her skills, Claire enrolled in a professional PI training course abroad after graduating. The program focused on advanced investigative techniques, allowing her to take her work to the next level. Now, she was not only a certified PI but also a master at staying invisible. But how did Claire fund her work? She never charged anyone for her services. Instead, the women she had helped created a way to support her anonymously. They started a trust fund where they could donate whatever they felt was right. Some sent hundreds of thousands, while others gave millions, simply because they were grateful for what Claire had done for their families. This allowed Claire to cover her expenses and continue helping others without worrying about money. The fact that she didn't charge for her services made her even more beloved, as it meant anyone in need could benefit from her work, no matter their financial situation. Claire also took on occasional side jobs as a cybersecurity consultant. Companies paid her to test their systems for weaknesses and suggest improvements. This extra income helped her stay independent and maintain her PI work without relying on anyone else. Despite her professional success, Claire's personal life remained guarded. Her work required her to keep secrets, and her hypersensitivity to lies and manipulation made it hard for her to trust others. But Claire wasn't just a PI. She was also a young woman who sometimes wondered if she could let someone into her life. One day, during a cybersecurity conference, Claire met someone who caught her attention. He was sharp, confident, and seemed to see through her reserved exterior. For the first time, Claire felt herself lowering her guard. But as much as she wanted to trust him, her instincts kept her cautious. What if he wasn't who he seemed to be? What if letting him in risked everything she had worked for? After the conference, Claire couldn't stop thinking about Jordan, the man she had met. He was charming, thoughtful, and seemed genuinely interested in her. For someone who was so used to guarding her emotions, Claire found herself wondering if she could let him in. But every time she tried, a small voice in her head reminded her of the risks. What if he found out about her secret? What if trusting him put everything she'd worked for in danger? For now, Claire decided to focus on her work. She buried herself in her cases, knowing that her mission was too important to risk. One evening, as Claire was reviewing new messages on her blog, one caught her attention. It wasn't from a woman or wife as usual, it was from a man. The message read, "I know you don't usually help men, but I need your expertise. My wife is cheating, and I can't prove it. She's also abusive and violent, and I've tried everything to save our marriage. I need your help to get out of this before it destroys me. If you don't help, I'll have to find other ways to expose her, and that could mean exposing you too." Claire stared at the screen, her heart racing. She had never taken on a case like this before. Her work was always about helping women, saving marriages, and supporting families. But this was different. This man wasn't trying to cheat or hurt anyone. He was trying to escape a toxic and dangerous relationship. Claire hesitated. She didn't want to stray from her mission, but she also knew the importance of addressing abuse, no matter who it affected. In societies where women were often seen as victims, it was rare to acknowledge that men could also suffer from violence and manipulation. After a long night of thinking, Claire decided to take the case. She reached out to the man, who introduced himself as David, a quiet and soft-spoken teacher. Over their conversation, David described his struggles. His wife, Amanda, had become increasingly violent over the years. She lashed out physically and emotionally, but no one believed him because of societal stereotypes. David had suspected Amanda of cheating for months, but couldn't gather the proof he needed. He hoped Claire's skills could help him finally get the evidence and take the steps to end their marriage. Claire began her investigation carefully, knowing that this case could bring her closer to being exposed. Amanda was cunning and always seemed to cover her tracks. But Claire's expertise in cybersecurity and her attention to detail helped her uncover Amanda's hidden life. She discovered that Amanda had been seeing someone else for months, and had even lied about their finances to hide her activities. As Claire worked on the case, she felt a mix of emotions. This wasn't about saving a marriage, it was about helping someone escape a dangerous situation. She realized that not every relationship could or should be saved. Sometimes walking away was the best choice. As Claire wrapped up David's case, she found herself reflecting on how far she had come. From a curious 14-year-old helping her aunt, to a skilled PI with a growing reputation, her journey had been anything but ordinary. She had touched the lives of so many women, and now, for the first time, helped a man escape a dangerous situation. It was a reminder that her work wasn't just about saving marriages. It was about bringing justice and peace to those who needed it most. Word about David's case began to spread quietly, just as it had with her earlier successes. This time, though, it wasn't only women who reached out. Claire started receiving messages from people, men and women, who were trapped in toxic or abusive relationships. They weren't asking to save their marriages. They were asking for a way out. At first, Claire hesitated. Her focus had always been on saving families, but now she saw a different side of her mission. There were people who needed her skills to rebuild their lives, not just their marriages. She realized that her work was evolving, opening doors she hadn't expected. Claire sat at her desk late one night, reading through the new messages. Each one reminded her of why she had started this journey: to help, to heal, and to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. She knew she couldn't stop now, but with this new chapter came new risks. Claire had to find a way to protect her identity, especially with more people learning about her work. She upgraded her security systems, changed her methods again, and became even more careful about leaving no trace. Staying anonymous was the only way she could continue helping people without putting herself in danger. In the midst of her reflections, Claire received an unexpected message. It wasn't from a client or someone seeking her help. It was from someone she hadn't spoken to since the cybersecurity conference. Jordan. Jordan had been on her mind more than she wanted to admit. His calm confidence and genuine interest in her had made an impression, but she had pushed him away to focus on her work. Now, his message was simple. I hope you're doing well. If you ever want to grab coffee and talk, I'm here. Claire smiled at the screen, feeling a mix of curiosity and hesitation. Maybe it was time to let someone in. Maybe it was time to trust. As she closed her laptop, Claire knew her journey was far from over. The work she did was more important than ever, and new challenges lay ahead. But for the first time, she felt ready to face them, not just as a PI, but as someone open to the possibility of connection and growth. If you love this story and want to see more, hit that subscribe button and join our community for even more amazing tales. Tell us in the comments who your favorite character is.